Why do people want to be outlaws? What is it? Why are they fascinated with it? And inevitably, the answer has to do with I don't want to be held by rules. I don't want to be told what to do. Now, isn't this fascinating? How many people don't want to be told what to do, and yet the thing people fear so much is taking responsibility for their choices. Hi everybody, time for another archetype video, and today I've chosen to do one that absolutely fascinates me. It fascinates me for maybe more than a half hour, which is how long my videos are. So I'm going to dive in, but I don't know when it's going to stop. So the archetype is the outlaw. The outlaw. I am fascinated with this archetype for all kinds of reasons. First of all, how fascinated Americans are with outlaws. They love their outlaws. All the outlaws from the West. And if you Google outlaws, like from the Western time, post-Civil War till about 1910, the list of people who are outlaws is unbelievable. Secondly, the stories of these people's lives, like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I actually thought that was a made-up story, but it's not. I mean, there really was a Butch Cassidy, there really was a Sundance, and they really don't know if Butch Cassidy escaped that last battle and went on to live disguised and had plastic surgery. I mean, this story is incredible, 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 only lending more outrageousness to the myth of outlaws. But what is it about living outside the law that is so incredibly appealing to people? So before we get in there, let's go this way. There's outlaw is an archetype, but in-law isn't. Isn't that funny? But anyway, the nature of life is law. So let's just, before we jump into the outlaw, let's just look at that. The nature of life is nothing but law and order. That's all it is, law and order. The laws of the universe, the laws of nature, the laws of science, the laws of your biology. The speed of your heart is governed by law. If it goes past a certain speed, you have a heart attack. Blood pressure, mathematics, it's all laws. Everything is law and order, and you want law and order in your life. You are a stickler for order. Every single person is. I don't know anybody who embraces chaos. They may live in personal chaos, but it's their chaos. And even their chaos has order to it according to how they see their chaos. Everybody establishes their own little queendom of laws in their life. Don't touch my stuff on my desk. Don't touch this. Don't do this. I mean, I remember one time when I was renting a room in this one place, and it was a private home. And, you know, I'm someone who's a stickler for privacy and respect, and I don't ever look into other people's stuff. I just don't do that. And in this one instance, I was editing a book, and I needed to do a final edit. I was in Europe. I needed to borrow the computer of the person in the house, and I asked him permission. I was renting a room, and I said, my editor has to send this chapter. I just have to go through, finish it. All he could think of was that I was going to break all the laws and go through his, I don't know what and I said, he said, you know, I can't, you can't use this. I mean, I need it from 8 in the morning. I said, I'll be there at 7. At 6:45, he was there, finding reasons to come in and out of the office. All I needed to do were the final edits and sign off. The whole thing took 20 minutes. He was broke out in sweat at the thought of what I might do that violated his space. It was extraordinary, extraordinary. You could feel the psychic eruption in his energy field. Laws. We establish laws in our life, and control freaks, laws, right? So what is it about the fascination of living outside the law that is so seductive to people? Well, I'm just going to wing it here. So see if this makes any sense to you. There is a thing. I could call it a flaw. I could call it a thing. But in our contemporary phase of humanness, we're being thought of as ordinary is something we hold in contempt. It can be anything but not ordinary. I mean, we name our children things like sunshine, meditation, karma, apple, North Star, bluebeard, who knows? Just not ordinary. Just not ordinary. We just cannot abide by not finding ways to step outside the ordinary. Because why? Well, we just have to be noticed. We have to be, and then what? And then what? Okay, so now I'm noticing you, and now what? Well, it's extraordinary what people will do. And part of this journey of, but I'm here, doesn't anyone notice I'm here? Is that the way we've decided to measure specialness is whether or not the ordinary contains you, or whether or not you're contained by the ordinary. For example, ordinary rules versus saying, I'm special. I don't have to live by those rules. Here's the first step. I have privilege. And because I have privilege, you have to wait in that line, but I can go in this line. And I have privilege. So I'm not stuck at the ordinary. I am now elevating myself to a level where the ordinary constraints don't contain me. They contain you. Now, past privilege is the next step, which is more than privilege. What does privilege mean? Well, privilege means that, I get first in line, best seating in the house, blah, 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 blah. I don't have to just wait for the crumbs like the ordinaries do. And then there's privilege and favors. And part of favors inevitably in this track go to social and civil laws that people start butting their heads against and say, does that law apply to me? I mean, I know it applies to you, but does it apply to me? I mean, can't you fix this ticket? Can't you do this? Can't you help that person? And it starts like that. So at the measure of, you wouldn't, at that point, consider yourself an outlaw. But you are now tampering with privilege and law. If you have enough money and you're the right color and you're this and that, laws don't apply to you. We are witnessing that in this society. We are witnessing the outlaws of the wealthy. And those who make the laws eventually become people who tamper with the laws in many cases. Not always, but in many cases. They find ways to skirt around the laws. We think, well, are you doing insider trading? Are you doing this or that? Because we can't do that. But once you're maybe in the Senate or in the Congress or here or there, well, who knows? Because now you're making the laws so you can maneuver the laws. They become, and they wouldn't consider themselves outlaws, but they consider themselves privileged. And part of that privilege is that they will maneuver the laws. Part of this draw of the outlaw is that people do not. One of the questions I put on my computer, just as a way of getting into this archetype at a deeper level, is, why do people want to be outlaws? What is it? Why are they fascinated with it? And inevitably, the answer has to do with, I don't want to be held by rules. I don't want to be told what to do. Now, isn't this fascinating? How many people don't want to be told what to do, and yet the thing people fear so much is taking responsibility for their choices. So they have it. All right, I won't tell you what to do. Do whatever you want. I don't want to do anything. I mean, what will they say? What will they say if I do this or this? The dilemma. The dilemma of responsibility for your actions. Whereas as an outlaw, it seems like in so many cases, the outlaw is someone who is against the very things I can't stand. Too much government, too much this, too many rules on the road, too much this. But I don't have the courage to do that myself, so I'll cheer them on. And how many outlaw video games there are, where the outlaws are heroes of sorts, people who live outside conventional controls. Conventional controls. And so one way to safely live outside what we call ordinary conventional controls is to strive for privilege as opposed to classic outlawlessness. Outlawlessness. But another reason, I think, because this is an archetype, obviously, is that from an archetypal point of view, I think there is this thing in people where they want to outwit, outrun the very mechanism of life that cannot be controlled. It cannot be bribed. It cannot be. And that's the mechanism of change, of ordinary things that happen all the time. Accidents, chaos, sudden death, things that we do not have control over. And this gives rise in our lives to the reasons people wear, what do you call those things? Rabbit's feet and superstitious stuff and medicine pouches and crystals and rocks and bells on their head and whatever it is. Because they're protecting from the reality of the organic laws of change that none of us has any way of controlling. We are all subject, excuse me, to the rising tides and the flows of nature. We are all subject to aging. We are all creatures of life. But the fear of the unknown, the fear that there's something out there we can't control, that has always, that maybe if we abide by laws, we can guarantee outcome. Here's, for example, bad things should not happen to good people. That is an unwritten law that people believe in, that somehow if I'm a good person, that will keep holy order in my life. And I will not get a sudden illness. I will not get terminal COVID. My children will not suddenly be kidnapped. I will not be subject to all the things that happen out there. And in a sense, it's a way of saying, I believe in karma. And so I'm doing everything I can consciously to live as consciously as I can, because I'm trying to stop surprise bad things from happening. Laws that govern us, I want to have influence over that. What the outlaw represents is, well, if I live outside the law, I have more authority over my immediate life environment, people in my life, the world as I want it. And it seems like when we respect the law, we are governed by others, whereas if you're an outlaw and you govern your life accordingly. Now, it's a very interesting thing for me. In all my years of teaching this class, teaching archetypes, teaching people to identify patterns, nobody, not one person, not in any country has said, I have the outlaw. Not one person. And it's fascinating because, what do you mean not one person? But people are so, perhaps they think that when they think of the outlaw, they think of Butch Cassidy, or they think of Jesse James, or Wyatt Earp, or all of these famous outlaws. What's the guy from Aces and Eights? Come on. Oh, I can see him. Wild Bill Hickok. These people, I don't know if he was formerly an outlaw or not, but at any rate. But archetypally, it's the instinct to not want to be governed by the ordinary laws that govern others because you find them humiliating, restricting. You tell yourself, that doesn't apply to you. That doesn't apply. I don't need to do that. I have someone who will take care of that for me. Someone will take care of that for me. Someone will take care of that. I don't have to be governed by the ordinary gravity field of this earth that obviously governs everybody else. Because if I recognize that I am just in an ordinary body like everybody else that is aging the same way everybody else's is, then I have to recognize that actually I don't have any privilege over the laws of nature at all. That at any given time, I can be called home. That at any given time, everything I've acquired can disappear like that. That at any given time, the forces of life are stronger than I am. And they govern this, not me. And that by living outside the law in any way, you tell yourself you can have ways of negotiating with the greater laws of life that apply to everybody else, but they don't apply to you. They don't apply to you. And so, what I would because this is one of those archetypes that I never encounter in a person, but that's nonsense because people do have this archetype. It is, I've spotted it in people, and I'm wondering, why do you not know yourself this well to recognize that you measure your sense of power by privilege, by how many laws you do not have to live by living outside the law, that by being constrained by law, you find that to be among the most humiliating possible things in the world. That in fact, the outlaw consciousness, however you call it, at that first stage of privilege, is in fact something you have an appetite, if not a talent for. So I'm tossing that out to many people, to all of you, because it's you may not think of yourself as a classic outlaw in the Jesse James sense of it, or in the gangs on the street. Of course not. Most people are not that. But every single person really does have to come to terms with how they view living within the law. The laws of their body, for example. You could be a biological outlaw, thinking that I can eat as much as I want, I can drink as much as I want, I can take whatever I want, and it won't affect my body because those laws don't apply to me. They apply to you. But I'm somebody who will just eat whatever I want, do whatever I want, and I'll just be just fine. That's a form of biological outlawing. You see, you've decided that the laws that apply to everybody else's biology don't apply to you because, and we've all done that. We've all broken the laws, the biological sphere of laws, but it's a form of how often do we decide to write our own rules because it suits us in the moment to not abide by the rules that govern everybody else, that we count on everybody else following for the sake of peace in our village, for the sake of all of us living in a civil society. It is a fascinating thing to me. It's fascinating how we have this relationship with law that is both essential and resenting, and we resent it. So I toss that out because I think there is also this instinct in us, I guess I would call it an instinct, in which we have to break laws, rules, laws, that in fact there comes a time when you realize this set of rules, they shouldn't apply anymore. The rules that keep people, socially apart, that keep them racially apart, that keep them, that women aren't as good as men. These kinds of laws that are put in order to control one group of people after another. These kinds of laws that need to be retired as time goes on, and you realize that a more conscious society doesn't need to be contained by those kinds of laws. So it almost calls the good outlaw out, like, well, don't we all love Robin Hood? Don't we all love the story of Robin Hood, who became an outlaw not for his own sake, but because he needed to help the king, and he needed to help the people that were being abused by King John. So he became perhaps the most beloved outlaw in Nottingham Forest. And there is something we still hear people say, this is a very Robin Hood. He just steals from the rich to give to the poor. And somehow that mechanism, that thinking, well, if you take from the rich and you give to the poor, well, then you're honorable. And I'm telling you, there are so many people whose comments about being an outlaw had to do with the fact that it seemed like it was an honorable thing to do, to take from the rich and give to the poor. And it reminded me of a couple of things, but one is, I don't know if you've ever watched this. It's a TV show, and I thought I didn't know what it was, but the first time I saw it, it's like shot about life in prison, and it's really in prison, and I can't lock up or lock down, something like that. At any rate, the first time, and I saw it twice, but the first time I saw it, I didn't know if it was a made-up reality show or what the heck is this? Are these actors or whatever? But then I found out it wasn't. And they're interviewing people in prison about being in prison and their life. And get this. 2 of the women incarcerated for theft, for being outlaws, right? They just could not figure out what the heck they were doing in there. Because from their point of view, and this is almost a quote, she said, I only stole from big, huge department stores. What are they complaining about? They have all that stuff and I just want a couple of things. I mean, my jaw dropped, right? The idea that the law of this isn't yours. I don't care how big this store is. You can't have something that's not yours. You simply can't take it. So part of the appeal of the outlaw is I just make my own laws. I make my own rules. I don't need to respect your rules because they're made for your world and you don't live in my world. And my world calls for different survival rules. And that is another part of this outlaw fascination, is that what you need to do to survive allows the outlaw archetype to edit the rules according to survival. Not unlike Les Miserables. I'll steal the bread. It's not for me. It's an act of theft, but I have to feed somebody. There's to act outside the law when it is essential to serve others versus serving yourself because your ego simply cannot bear to be governed by the laws of the ordinary. By the laws of the ordinary. It's so fascinating. So I'm just going to toss that out as when I look at Congress or any politician, I'm always thinking outlaw, someone who absolutely craves the capacity to make the laws so they can maneuver the laws. It shouldn't surprise anybody why lawmakers are so often arrested or investigated, because that's part of how they measure privilege. These laws don't apply. If I have enough money, the laws don't apply. If I have enough fame, the laws don't apply. It is always the outlaw that kicks in. It's now I have enough so that the laws of life don't apply to me, so that the laws that govern society don't apply to me. How much will it take so that the laws don't apply to me? Maybe ultimately, which is why I look at these uber wealthy people, like, what's his face, Musk, and some of these other characters who have more money than the universe. Ultimately, they get to a place where they start thinking the laws about where to live. I'll use the universe. I'll just go out there. I'll create yet another universe because I have so much. I can just leave this planet if it gets so bad, and I'll just zoom off and make a colony on Mars or on the moon, and because the laws that govern your life don't govern mine, because look at all the stuff I have. No. I am just saying that we have an interesting relationship with law. And it goes all the way down to our bio-spiritual ecology. And how the laws of our conscience and the laws of our consciousness govern the world in which we are co-creators. So, I really could carry on about this and carry on about this and carry on, but I want to just thank you. And I do want to say, give a moment of time for your inner self and say, where am I with this? How do I feel? I mean, if someone said, hey, respect the law, or you don't have that privilege or whatever, would you find it humiliating? Or would you think, well, yeah, that's the way life is. Okay, mommy's coming. Or would you think, well, yeah, I mean, that's the nature of how this place operates. The outlaw. Thank you, everybody.